Hey everybody, we're back for another segment of the Clemon Corner. And this week I want to tackle the topic of social activism and its implications for athlete development. And we're going to be talking some about athletes and their identities beyond sports and how even activism can be reflective of what we would like to see from an athlete development perspective of a healthy, well-rounded athlete. So it's been a busy week in the NFL. Obviously, the new season has begun with the preseason games starting in full. And ever since 2016, every year the question is asked, what's going to happen as far as protests? Who's taking a knee? We know Colin Kaepernick is 890 days plus into not being hired. He recently was on social media this week talking about the fact that he's game ready and is actually keeping account of the number of days since he's played a game or been with the team. The first player to join him in the protests several years ago, Eric Reid, is now with the Carolina Panthers. He's announced that he's going to continue protesting. Probably most interestingly this week, Kenny Stills, a player for the Miami Dolphins, has called out the owner of his team. Stephen Ross owns not only Miami Dolphins, but Equinox and SoulCycle, very popular sports and athletic brands. And it was reported this week that he hosted a fundraiser for President Trump, which in and of itself might not be that surprising given the typical profile of NFL owners. But what's surprising about Stephen Ross having a fundraiser for the president is that he owns a national nonprofit called RISE, the Ross Initiative in Sports and Equality. And the mission of RISE is to educate and empower the sports community to eliminate racial discrimination, champion social justice, and improve race relations. So there seems to be a dichotomy between Ross throwing his support around a president whose comments are racist, and him having this nonprofit that specifically is designed to combat racism and using sports to do it. So Stills calls him out on it, and by all accounts, even Stills has received death threats as a result of doing so. So it's been fairly controversial. I don't want to get too deep into the political aspect of that. Not that that's not important, but that's not what this particular discussion is about. As follow-up, President Trump has come out and said that he's okay with Kaepernick playing if he's good enough. That could be, again, dissected. But what I really want to get into is how with Kaepernick, with Stills, with some even more higher profile athletes who are very engaged in social justice and activism, LeBron, Megan Rapinoe, even the Williams sisters, who both have minority stakes in the Miami Dolphins, by the way. What are the implications when you have athletes that are involved in activism and this brand of activism specifically? I was fortunate enough to attend the Professional Association of Athlete Development Specialists, PADS, annual symposium last summer, and was particularly honored to get a chance to talk to Coach Stan Van Gundy. He had done a presentation there, and afterwards I had a moment to chat with Coach. And because social activism is an area, and elite athletes is an area of interest for me from a research standpoint, I was interested in getting Coach's thoughts about his players and whether he encouraged activism and engagement in the community. And Coach said he likes his players well-rounded. He likes to see them engaged in activities and interests outside of sports, because what he said that what he had observed is players that are engaged in things beyond sports bring a better version of themselves actually to the court and from a performance standpoint. So he was articulated that he's wholly in support of players being engaged and involved in social activism as the players decide they need to or is appropriate. And the flip side of that is that it's kind of dangerous when you get players who are so engulfed in their identities as players that they haven't explored who they are beyond that. That's a form of what's called identity foreclosure. And you start to see it really kind of can manifest itself among elite athletes at the collegiate space. So student athletes who exclusively focus in on their identity in sports aren't doing any extracurriculars outside of sports, which they typically can't because sports literally consumes all their schedules. Well, there's a downside for them. Those are the students that once their days of playing are over and they've retired from sports, you're more likely to see signs of emotional distress from them. They're also more likely to engage in risky behaviors, and they can demonstrate an immaturity when it comes to lifestyle and career planning. So these are all the hazards that come when we have athletes that frankly just shut up and dribble. Like that's a dangerous proposition for the long-term physical and emotional and professional health of that person to only be engaged in themselves as an athlete, and in no other way are they looking to explore who they are. Um, so this is an important topic for sports and for collegiate programs, for leagues and for teams. And I think that an athlete development specialist perspective or assessment, I think that from that perspective, the NBA is kind of getting it is getting it right as far as how they've managed how their players get involved and are socially active, as opposed to the NFL, which still struggles to find a balance as to how to manage their business and allow their players to be their fully self-actualized selves. So this is an important topic. It'll be interesting to see how not only the NFL protest unfolds, will Kaepernick get signed, and how might that change the tone of the protests. But overall, from an athlete development standpoint, we as specialists would encourage players to explore interests outside of sports, and to the extent that they're considering engaging in protest, a la a Colin Kaepernick or Eric Reed, it is important for them to assess the pros and cons of doing it. So if you're going to go into that level of social activism, where you're using your platform, but in your professional space on the playing field, you've just got to be very deliberate and strategic about how you do that, and that you are prepared fully for the consequences of having done it. Well, that's all for this week. I want to thank you all for continuing to watch the video, and we'll see you again next week.